Judge Harold Whitman was the epitome of respectability. With over 3 decades on the bench, his stern gaze and unyielding adherence to the law were almost legendary. In his pristine office, lined with leather-bound legal volumes and plaques of recognition, he ruled his courtroom with an iron fist. The city hailed him as the last bastion of justice in a world tainted by corruption. But behind the polished veneer of justice, shadows lurked, dark secrets that few dared to acknowledge. Samuel Blake was not one of those people. An investigative journalist for the Metro Tribune, Blake had spent his career exposing fraud, corruption, and injustice. His tenacity for uncovering hidden truths had earned him both enemies and accolades. But the tip that landed on his desk that rainy afternoon was different. A plain manila envelope, no return address, just his name scrawled hastily in black ink. Inside, there was a USB drive and a single note, "Follow the money." Blake's instincts kicked in immediately. He plugged the drive into his laptop and opened the first file. What he found was staggering: a list of transactions, offshore accounts, and names linked to judicial rulings that spanned over 2 decades. At the top of every major transaction was Judge Harold Whitman. Millions had exchanged hands, some tied to construction companies, others to private prisons and pharmaceutical settlements. Whitman's courtroom was less about justice and more about profit. The deeper Blake dug, the uglier it got. A major real estate deal that had bankrupted hundreds of low-income families was pushed through Whitman's courtroom with suspiciously swift approval. A drug kingpin who was supposed to serve life in prison had his conviction overturned due to insufficient evidence, despite overwhelming proof. All trails led back to the judge. But spreadsheets and bank statements weren't enough. Blake needed someone from the inside, someone who could verify what was really going on behind those towering courthouse walls. That's when he found her, Anna Grant, a former clerk who had worked directly under Judge Whitman for nearly a decade. Tracking her down wasn't easy. After she left the courthouse 3 years prior, she had practically disappeared. Rumors swirled that she left the state or that she'd been paid off to keep quiet. But Blake's persistence led him to a small coffee shop in a quiet part of town, where she worked under a different name. "Anna Grant?" Blake asked, sliding into the booth across from her. She stiffened, her eyes darting to the exit. "You've got the wrong person," she replied, her voice flat and unconvincing. "No, I don't," Blake said, lowering his voice. He slid a single photograph across the table, a still shot from courthouse security footage of her handing a thick manila folder to Judge Whitman. Her hand hovered over it for a moment before she finally pulled it back. "What do you want?" she whispered. "Justice," Blake replied. "And I think you do too." Anna's shoulders slumped. For a long moment, she said nothing, just staring at the photograph with hollow eyes. Finally, she spoke. "I can't. He'll destroy me." Blake leaned forward. "He already has. You're hiding. You're running. How much longer are you going to live in fear?" Anna looked out the window, her eyes tracing the outline of raindrops against the glass. "I saw things that no one should see. Evidence disappearing, files being altered. He wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous." "Tell me everything," Blake urged. Over the next 2 hours, Anna recounted stories that sent chills down Blake's spine. Judge Whitman wasn't just taking bribes, he was running an empire of corruption. Cases were rigged, witnesses were threatened, and in some instances, those who dared to oppose him simply disappeared. Whitman had powerful friends, ones who ensured his seat on the bench remained unchallenged. He always said the law was just a tool, something to be bent, shaped, and used, Anna whispered. "And I helped him. I was part of it." Her hands trembled, eyes welling with tears. "You were following orders," Blake assured her. "But now you have the chance to make it right." Anna hesitated, then nodded. "If I do this, I'm going to need protection." Blake nodded. "I'll make sure of it." Within weeks, the Metro Tribune broke the story. The headline read, "Judge Whitman's Empire of Corruption, a Legacy Built on Injustice." Blake's article was airtight. Detailed financial records, testimony from Anna Grant, and a series of damning photographs exposed decades of corruption. The public outcry was immediate. Protests erupted outside the courthouse. Politicians distanced themselves from Whitman like he was a live grenade. But Whitman wasn't one to go down quietly. Days after the article's release, Blake's apartment was ransacked. His phone buzzed with anonymous threats, and Anna reported strange cars parked outside her building. Whitman had resources, powerful ones, but Blake had something stronger, the truth. Under pressure from the Department of Justice, Whitman was indicted on charges of bribery, money laundering, and conspiracy. His arrest was broadcasted live, ironically, in the very courtroom where he had ruled for 3 decades. Shackled and led away, the once untouchable judge now faced the justice he had twisted for years. As for Samuel Blake, the story propelled him to national recognition, and Anna Grant started a new life under witness protection. The city's faith in its judicial system would take years to rebuild, but the shadow cast by Judge Whitman's corruption had finally been exposed to the light. And all it took was one man's determination and one woman's courage to bring a lifetime of corruption crashing down. Judge Harold Whitman's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Headlines splashed his downfall across every major newspaper, while cable news networks dissected his empire of corruption. His name, once synonymous with justice, now evoked anger and betrayal. But for Samuel Blake, the story was far from over. Just days after Whitman's arrest, Blake received an encrypted email. There was no subject line, just a single message: "You only scratched the surface." Attached were scanned documents, more offshore accounts, new names, and whispers of a network that stretched beyond Whitman's courtroom. It hinted at powerful businessmen, real estate moguls, even political figures, all tied to Whitman's rulings. Blake's instincts flared. He knew this went deeper than a single judge. He called Anna Grant. Her voice was shaky when she picked up. "I saw the news." "You really did it," she said, half whispering. "It's not over," Blake replied. "I got something today." "I think Whitman was just the beginning." There was silence on the line. I need to tell you something," she finally said. Whitman wasn't working alone. There were meetings, secret ones. He called them board reviews. They were always late at night, in the old courthouse annex. I wasn't allowed in, but I saw who came and went. Blake's pulse quickened. "Who was there?" Anna hesitated. "City officials. CEOs, even a congressman once. Whitman called them his partners in progress." Blake scribbled furiously. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because I thought it would die with him. But if you're saying it's bigger," her voice trembled. "I can show you." The next evening, Anna met Blake outside the crumbling stone steps of the old courthouse annex. It was long abandoned, officially, anyway. The windows were boarded up, graffiti lined the walls, and the iron gates hung loosely on rusted hinges. But as they approached, Anna pointed to a side entrance hidden by overgrown bushes. "They always went in through here." Blake pushed the door, and to his surprise, it opened easily. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and neglect. Anna led him through winding hallways until they reached a room sealed off with police tape. Faded letters above the door read Judicial Review Boardroom. Blake snapped a photo and pulled the tape aside. The room was surprisingly untouched. A massive oak table stretched across its center, with 12 high-backed chairs surrounding it. Folders were piled neatly at each seat, and the faint smell of cigar smoke lingered in the air. "They always met on the 3rd Thursday of every month," Anna whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows as if expecting someone to emerge. "Whitman would be here with them for hours." Blake rifled through the files on the table. Meeting minutes, disguised as city planning discussions, real estate evaluations, and judicial reviews. But the language was coded. Strategic asset acquisition replaced land grabbing. Re-evaluation of community risks substituted for evictions. It was corruption on an industrial scale. "There's a whole network," Blake murmured, flipping through the papers. "This isn't just him. This is everyone." A noise echoed from the hallway. Both of them froze. Blake stuffed the files into his bag and pulled Anna toward the door. "We need to go. Now." They slipped out of the annex just as headlights swept across the parking lot. Blake glanced back to see 2 men in suits stepping out of a black sedan, their eyes scanning the lot with precision. "You were right," Blake said, breathing heavily as they ducked into an alley. Whitman was just the beginning. The next morning, Blake's article hit the front page again. This time, it named names. CEOs of construction companies, local politicians, even the mayor's office was implicated. The scandal, now dubbed the Judge's Web, became a nationwide sensation. Protests flared up, demanding justice, demanding accountability. But the backlash was swift. Blake's office was broken into, files were stolen, computers wiped clean. Anna reported unmarked cars idling outside her apartment, men in suits watching her every move. Threats came by phone, by mail, warnings to back off or face consequences. Blake reached out to federal authorities, handing over everything he had. 2 days later, a federal investigation was announced, one that stretched far beyond the city limits. The corruption spread through state lines, involving banks, real estate conglomerates, and political campaigns. Judge Whitman's arrest had only been the start. When Whitman finally appeared in court, he was gaunt and hollow-eyed, the confidence drained from his once imposing figure. His lawyer read out a statement, not guilty on all charges. But the evidence was overwhelming. Offshore accounts were linked directly to his signature. Anna's testimony laid bare years of bribery and judicial manipulation. The courtroom gasped when she recounted late-night meetings, hushed whispers of payouts, and veiled threats against those who questioned the system. But it was Blake's final article that shattered everything. Entitled The Silent Courtroom, it named the shadow members of Whitman's secret gatherings, detailing their transactions, their hidden projects, and the way justice had been bought and sold in backrooms. The fallout was catastrophic. Arrests swept across the city, political careers crumbled, and for the first time in decades, the people saw what lay behind the curtain. Judge Whitman was sentenced to life without parole. Anna Grant vanished into witness protection, her name etched in history as the whistleblower who helped topple a regime of corruption. And Samuel Blake? He became a household name, a journalist who proved that sometimes one story really could change the world. But even as Whitman sat behind bars, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that there were more like him, more hidden boardrooms, more sealed files. He kept digging, kept searching, because corruption doesn't die, it just hides. And Samuel Blake was very, very good at finding things that were meant to stay hidden. The fallout from Judge Whitman's trial was monumental. His life sentence sent a powerful message, but it also stirred something far more dangerous: fear. As federal agents combed through the files Blake had uncovered, dozens of powerful figures began to feel the heat. Investigations were launched, subpoenas were issued, and the city's elite squirmed under the spotlight. But for Samuel Blake, it wasn't over. Not yet. 3 weeks after Whitman's conviction, Blake received another anonymous message. This time, it wasn't an email or an envelope. It was a flash drive, left at his doorstep, wrapped in a plain brown cloth with a single word scribbled on the outside: deeper. Blake hesitated. The last tip had almost cost him everything. But curiosity and that unyielding thirst for truth pulled him back in. He plugged the drive into his laptop and waited. A single video file blinked on the screen. Its title read, "The Meeting, 2022. Blake clicked play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 2 years prior. It showed a long, mahogany table inside what looked like a private club. Men and women in suits sat comfortably, sipping on glasses of aged whiskey, laughing as if nothing in the world could touch them. But then the camera panned, and Blake's heart dropped. There, at the head of the table, sat Judge Harold Whitman, flanked by city officials, 2 real estate moguls, and, Blake couldn't believe it, the state attorney general. Conversations overlapped, but one voice cut through the noise. It was Whitman's. "Gentlemen, as long as the courts remain ours, the city remains ours." A round of applause followed, glasses clinking. The camera zoomed in, catching faces clearly. There were nods of approval, discussions of land acquisitions, courtroom favors, and whispered deals. Blake paused the video and took screenshots of each face, cross-referencing them with public records. It wasn't just local corruption, it was statewide. Blake knew what he had to do. This wasn't just a story anymore, it was a revelation. He reached out to his federal contacts, passing on the video and the names. Within days, raids were conducted across the state. Offices were locked down, servers seized, and more than a dozen arrests followed. But it didn't stop there. Whispers of bribery and coercion reached Washington. An independent task force was formed to root out judicial corruption, inspired by the Whitman files, as the scandal came to be known. For weeks, Blake was hailed as a hero. His articles were picked up by national outlets. Talk shows invited him to speak about corruption and the power of journalism. But Blake couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing, that the network Whitman was part of didn't begin or end with him. One night, as Blake was reviewing notes in his apartment, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He hesitated but picked up. "You're getting too close," the voice rasped. It was calm, almost pleasant. "You did well with Whitman, but you're stirring up dust where it doesn't belong." Blake's hand tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm someone who appreciates balance. And right now, you're tipping the scales." The line went dead. Blake sat in silence, heart hammering. He knew the risk of poking at powerful people, but this was different. It was colder, more calculated. He looked out the window and noticed, for the first time, a black car idling across the street. Its headlights flickered once before disappearing into the night. The next morning, Blake found another envelope on his doorstep. Inside was a chess piece, a black king, intricately carved, and polished to a shine. There was no note, no address. Just the chess piece, standing as if it were a warning. Or perhaps an invitation. Blake held it in his hands, turning it over thoughtfully. He had brought down a corrupt judge, exposed a network of influence, and sparked a nationwide investigation. But now, it was clear, Whitman had only been a pawn. Somewhere out there, the real power was still at play, watching his every move. Blake stared at the Black King for a long time before setting it on his desk, right next to his laptop. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The Black King sat on Samuel Blake's desk like a sentry, its polished surface glinting in the dim light of his study. It had been days since the mysterious phone call, and Blake's mind buzzed with questions. He pored over every note, every contact he had pulled from the Whitman files, searching for connections he might have missed. But the deeper he dug, the more the pieces seemed to slip through his grasp. It was almost midnight when his phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Blake's fingers hesitated before answering. "You still haven't figured it out," the voice said, the same smooth tone as before. Blake's grip tightened. "You like playing games, don't you? Sending me chess pieces and cryptic calls. Why don't you tell me who you are?" A soft chuckle echoed through the line. "That would ruin the fun. But since you've been so persistent, check your inbox." The call cut off abruptly. Blake hurried to his laptop, fingers tapping impatiently as he opened his email. At the top of his inbox, there was a new message with no subject line and no sender address. He opened it. Inside was a single line. "Follow the trail. Room 214, Fairmont Plaza, midnight." Blake's instincts flared. It reeked of a trap, but he had to know. Grabbing his coat, he slipped his recorder into his pocket and headed out into the cold, rainy night. The Fairmont Plaza was a relic of old wealth, its grand architecture towering above the city streets. Blake moved through the lobby unnoticed, his footsteps hushed by the thick red carpet. He found room 214 at the end of the second-floor hallway, the door slightly ajar. Blake paused, listening. Silence. He pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The room was empty, save for a single leather briefcase sitting on the desk. Blake approached cautiously, flipping the latches open. Inside were stacks of documents, bound neatly and stamped with seals he recognized. Local government, banking institutions, real estate corporations. But it was the photographs that stopped him cold. There, in high-resolution black and white, were Judge Whitman, the state attorney general, and 3 other men Blake couldn't place, shaking hands, passing envelopes, meeting in dimly lit rooms. Beneath each image were dates and locations. The conspiracy didn't just end with Whitman, it was woven into the very fabric of the city. Blake's hands trembled as he took out his camera, snapping photos of every page, every photograph. He knew he had just stumbled onto something far bigger than even Whitman's circle. He was about to close the briefcase when a slip of paper caught his eye, tucked into the lining. It read, "The king watches over the board. But it's the players you should fear." A chill ran down Blake's spine. He stuffed the documents back in, snapped the briefcase shut, and hurried out of the room. But as he stepped back into the hallway, two men in dark suits were waiting for him. One of them smiled coldly. "Mr. Blake, you've been very busy." Blake turned to run, but the second man grabbed him, twisting his arm behind his back. "We don't appreciate snoops poking around where they don't belong." Blake struggled, but the man's grip was iron. "You think I'm the problem? You're protecting criminals." Blake spat. The first man stepped closer, voice lowering to a whisper. "No. We're protecting order." He leaned in, his breath hot against Blake's ear. "You were warned. But you just couldn't help yourself." Blake felt the prick of a needle in his neck. His vision blurred, the hallway spinning in slow motion. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the man straightening his tie and whispering, "Good night, Mr. Blake." Blake woke up in his apartment, the sunlight spilling through the curtains. His head throbbed, and his mouth was dry. He struggled to his feet, nearly tripping over the edge of the coffee table. His laptop was open, the screen blinking. He didn't remember leaving it on. With shaky hands, he sat down and clicked the trackpad. His email was open, his drafts folder specifically. A new draft was waiting, written entirely in capital letters. "Stay away. This is your last warning." Blake stared at the screen, heart pounding. They had been inside his apartment. They had left him a message. He glanced toward his desk. The Black King chess piece was gone. Panic bubbled in his chest, but it quickly turned to fury. He grabbed his phone and dialed Anna Grant. She picked up after 2 rings. "Anna, it's me. I need you to come over. Now." 20 minutes later, Anna arrived, her eyes wide with worry. "What happened?" Blake locked the door behind her, pulling her toward the kitchen table where he had spread out the photos and documents from room 214. "This isn't just Whitman. It's everyone. Banks, state officials, developers. They've been moving money, buying land, rigging elections. And it goes higher." Anna stared at the documents, her hand covering her mouth. This is huge." "It's dangerous," Blake corrected. "They got into my apartment. Left me a message." He showed her the email. Her face went pale. "You can't stay here." Blake shook his head. "I'm not running. This isn't just a story anymore, it's a war. And I'm going to win." Anna hesitated, then nodded resolutely. "Then I'm with you." Blake took a deep breath, feeling a surge of resolve harden his spine. They had tried to silence him, to make him disappear. But now, it was personal. He slid his phone across the table toward Anna. "We're going to need more than just evidence. We're going to need allies." Anna smiled, determination flashing in her eyes. "I know just the people." Blake leaned back, his eyes fixed on the documents sprawled before him. The Black King might be gone, but the game had just begun. And this time, Samuel Blake wasn't playing by their rules.